If you think about the moments that actually changed how you were seen at work, they probably weren't those formal annual reviews. They were in the mess, the reorg that nobody understood. Been there. The project that didn't really have an owner yet, but needed to get done. And the meeting where somebody had to clarify what the real issue is. You know what I'm saying? The elephant in the room. Those are usually the moments where positioning can shift. That's when people learn how you operate. Today, we are digging in to where leverage is actually formed within organizations. Welcome to Control Your Career. I'm Julia Toothacre, your strategic career consultant, and I'm so glad that you're here. This season is about career leverage, how your career evolves once credibility is established and you're ready for more strategic positioning. In this episode, we are moving from theory to application. I'm going to show you where leverage actually forms within organizations through ambiguous work, cross-functional exposure, higher level problem solving, and of course, during transitions. The goal is for you to start recognizing these moments in real time so that you're not waiting for formal opportunities to evolve your positioning and that leverage. Let's get into it. First, let's start by talking about ambiguity. This is something where I have seen my clients really get their positioning pretty quickly. And that's because there are transitions happening, and we're going to talk about transitions more deeply in a little bit. But it's in this ambiguity where people really are able to make a name for themselves. So what does that look like? Reorganizations is one of the main ways that I have seen people really be able to make a name for themselves if the reorg works in their favor. It doesn't always, but it's definitely something that you can leverage. And I know most of us have gone through some type of reorganization at some point in our career. In some cases, maybe our company has been bought out and there's a reorg that comes along with that. There are so many opportunities there for you to insert yourself and make yourself known, especially if the reorg helps solve something that you know has been an issue. All right. Other areas of ambiguity are shifting priorities. So this is where a team or even an organization starts to shift. And sometimes it's because they have to, sometimes it's because they want to, and you have an opportunity to speak into that. Again, doesn't always happen, but if you can be vocal, if you can be somebody that understands the new priority and understands how to apply it, then that is definitely a way for you to make a name for yourself. And also new initiatives. I think this is such a great way, especially for, I would say, my more early career professionals to really get in at the bottom of something and become an expert in it for the organization. So never overlook new initiatives. Now, they don't always go somewhere, but you hope that they do, and you hope that the right people see the work that you're putting in and it becomes leverage for you later. And then another area that I think is overlooked, and this happens a lot on teams more so than the larger organization, but gaps in ownership of different priorities and things like that. A lot of times we are really quick to talk about what is missing, what are the gaps. We know what the gaps are, but nobody actually wants to solve it. Nobody actually wants to step outside of what they're doing. And I think that's where people who understand leverage and want something more, they're able to step into those gaps and take ownership. Now, there is a strategic way to do that. You don't want to step into just any gap, but if that works with your longer term goals and vision for your career, then it's a great opportunity to really create that leverage for yourself. So we have all this ambiguity. And then what happens? We recognize it. We talk about it, right? This is something we talk about with our coworkers, or we come home and we talk to our spouse about all this ambiguity going on in the organization. And then people react to ambiguity in different ways. We have some people who completely reject the ambiguity and they retreat and they go back into, this is my job, this is what I do, and this is all I'm doing. And that's fine. There are some people that that's what they need, that's what they want, and that's okay. But it's definitely going to limit your leverage. And then some people will step into the ambiguity and they really see the opportunity. They see where, this is something that's going to get me in a room with this person. Maybe the skill isn't exactly what I'm looking for, but I know that I can turn it into something where they recognize this other skill that I want to be known for, usually strategy. And you're in the room with the right people. And so you're making a really thoughtful decision around putting yourself into that gap. This changes how you are perceived. So ambiguity happens all the time. So it's not like a big transition like we'll talk about in a little bit. These are just things that are constantly going on. So you want to think about, what ambiguity is there on my team? What ambiguity is there even in your position if you wanted to start small and start there? And then what ambiguity is there within the organization? And are there opportunities for me to step into that? Not all of you are going to be able to do that because of where you're at in your career, but you want to start noticing where it's available and whether there's opportunity for you there. So let me give you some more concrete examples that I think will help you visualize this in your own organization. So think about a project that loses an owner after a leadership change. That happens all the time. So if this is a project that maybe you were a part of, or you know that you have some skill in being able to bring together or bring back together, then instead of waiting for somebody to say, hey, I need you to own this, you can be the person that volunteers and says, hey, I think I can step into this and here's why. And then you are giving yourself leverage to, as somebody that steps into a position and then also is solving a need that maybe got lost, right, in the shuffle of the leadership change. Something else to consider is a new strategy is announced. I know I've lived through this a lot. A new strategy is announced, but no one has really translated it into what the execution steps are going to look like. So we have this great strategy, but they haven't quite put together who is going to own it, what is it going to look like, okay? This is something where if you hear about an initiative, even if it's in another area that's not yours, but you're excited about it and you can see how you can add value, then you go to that person that is announcing that initiative and you let them know that you want to be a part of it. You might be in a position to lead, but you also might be in a great position to just be in the room and be a part of it. So you want to help bring that initiative to life and ask how you can do that. Now, caveat here, some of you will have management issues. So what I mean by that is you have a manager that does not want you stepping over them, sidestepping them. So you have to figure out the situation that you're in and whether or not it's possible. Sometimes you have to go through your manager. Sometimes your manager needs to be an advocate for you. So just understand where you're at in your organization and the relationship with your manager, and then adjust accordingly for that. Something else that I think is really helpful and a good example of stepping in and being able to solve bigger problems, whether it's your problem or not, is when you see duplication of work or duplication of process. I know this used to happen so much in higher education where multiple people were duplicating things and we would have to go through the processes and the steps to try to make it more efficient. Anytime that you can make work more efficient, managers are going to love you for the most part. It doesn't work everywhere, but for the most part, being more efficient, being able to identify redundancy and then come up with a solution, people are going to look favorably toward you on that. And so that's definitely an area that you can look at for possible leverage, again, within this idea of ambiguity. You have to remember that leverage is, it's not something that just happens because it happens. Okay. You gain leverage when responsibility within all this ambiguity is fluid. Okay. So it's in the questions that people are asking and what is being presented. And if you are somebody that can handle that well, and you can make a good judgment call or a good, you have a good idea of what to do, that's where you're now starting to create leverage, whether or not you're the person that actually steps in and does anything about it. Okay. So I definitely want you to think about, where is there ambiguity within your organization or on your team, and where can you step in a way that feels good to you and in a way that you know is going to help further your career. The next area I want to look at is cross-functional exposure. Now, not every organization allows for this, but many do. And I think that this is one of the best ways for people to increase leverage within an organization, especially if you want to move somewhere else off the team that you are currently on or out of the department that you're currently in. Again, not all functions allow for that, but cross-functional exposure is one of the best ways to do that. So what does that look like for you? So first of all, you want to make sure that the team that you're on is already doing well. And the reason for that is because if you have a strong team, then that team becomes an example. And then you sometimes can get farmed out to other teams to help them, get to where your team is at. So that is one thing to consider, especially if you're a manager. I think that's something that gets really overlooked, is if your team is performing well, then you can get pulled to help other teams perform well. And then that allows you to have that, that cross-functional exposure, whether it's in your department or not. And then when you have exposure across teams, it gives you a broader view of what you're doing, gives you a broader view of the organization, which if you use well, you can leverage that vision and that exposure to understand bigger problems within the organization, or you can understand where there's opportunity within the organization for you or for teams to collaborate. So anytime that you can work cross-functionally, you're giving yourself more leverage and more information to be able to make decisions. It also allows you to be trusted by decision makers across the organization. So a lot of times you have your line of decision makers and managers, and that's great. They know you, they know the work that you do. But when you can get outside of that, now we're having different conversations. Now your awareness in other parts of the organization could allow you to get pulled for other projects, or possibly even transferred over if that's something that you are looking for. I think one thing that can be really overlooked in organizations is when they ask for volunteers for different groups. We had different names for them in higher education, but essentially you're part of a group that helps with employee engagement. And so this might be planning a party. It might be, heading up what are we going to do in terms of lunch and learns or different things like that. Anything where the whole company is involved and we're trying to get connection between the employees. And I know, again, some of you are rolling your eyes because you're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be more involved than I already am. Well, then this isn't for you. Because if you're not willing to step outside of your comfort zone, then you're not willing to build the leverage that you need to get your career to where you want it. Okay. And so in this instance, I think one thing that really helps is when you have a group that is made up of people from all different levels across all different parts of the organization, you are now making new connections. These are people that are now seeing you in a different light. And in some cases allows you to use a skill set that maybe you don't use in your everyday work. So something that I did when I was working was I was part of a couple different organization-wide groups, and we had different initiatives that we did. Well, my background's in art, graphic design, and marketing. That's not necessarily what I was doing in my position. I was doing career counseling. But one of the things that I did in these groups was I did all the design and I did all the marketing for these different events that we put on that were organization wide. And so it was really great because it started a lot of conversations for me, and it gave me exposure across the organization into areas that I never would have made a natural connection. And I think that that really helped in terms of how people viewed me in other parts of the organization. Now, I will say where I did not do well was translating that into leadership. So I did not leverage my decision maker leadership connections well enough. And that was part of my downfall. So again, you want to be strategic with some of these decisions, but definitely try to get on some kind of committee or group or project where you are working with people outside of your team, your normal team. So here are some examples of what that can look like outside of what I just shared with you. So this could be a marketing manager who volunteers to partner with the product team on launch planning and learns how the roadmap decisions are made. And so even though a lot of times marketing comes in at the end, and is like, okay, how are we going to market this whole thing? They're now saying, hey, bring me in earlier so that I understand the process, because that can also kickstart the creative process for somebody in marketing. And so it gives you more leverage within that team. It also builds trust so that when you work together to build out that marketing plan, you now have a better understanding of what they've gone through, who owns what, who knows what, and you're able to make better decisions in your position. I think also of like an operations leader who maybe joins in on a finance review to understand how budget decisions affect headcount. I cannot explain to you the benefit of understanding budget and finances of your organization when you have the ability to be in the room. That was something that when I took an interim leadership position, I was given a budget with zero budget training. Common sense told me a lot of things and I was able to navigate it. But sitting down with somebody who was a finance expert and understanding how and why decisions were made was so helpful to me. So sometimes it's utilizing the resources that you have available to learn more. So it's not necessarily a formal relationship, but just a couple of meetings to help understand the context of a situation. And now you have exposure to a new area within the organization. And then another example, and I think this is one of the best examples and something that does happen, I know, in multiple organizations, but mentoring. Anytime that as a new professional or senior professional, you can be part of a mentoring program, formal or informal within an organization, do it. Absolutely do it. Because you not only get to see different perspectives from the mentor-mentee relationship, regardless of what side you're on, but you also get exposure to people in other parts of the organization who are doing something different from you. Mentoring can look different depending on what you want. I know sometimes they try to keep mentoring within the department, but honestly, any mentor-mentee relationship within an organization is going to be helpful. Again, because you get the different perspectives. So that is another way that I think is pretty easy to get some of that cross-functional exposure without really ruffling any feathers. And if your organization doesn't have something formal, I think if you know somebody that you want to meet with, you can ask them. Or if you are part of a larger organization, jump onto LinkedIn, find people within the organization that you think would be a good fit in terms of being a mentor for you or just a good connection, and contact them. You never know. And again, it just helps you get more exposure to different parts of the organization. All right. The next section I want to talk about in terms of leverage within your organization is solving higher level problems. I think that this is one of the biggest gaps that I see for most professionals. And I don't think that it's intentional. I think a lot of it comes when we're just not thinking strategically about our careers, and we're just going along and we're going through the motions of, working somewhere, and we just don't think about it. So one of the things that we want to look back on is like that entry level thinking through that mid to late career thinking. So when we are in entry level, everything is very task oriented. It's execution oriented. It allows us to go, I know how to do the job, right? It allows us to say, hey, I have competence in this. I can do it. Execute, execute, execute. When you switch into problem solving mode and when you switch into this problem, like understanding higher level problems and what to look for and how to talk about them, you are now switching into that more leveraged strategic thinking, right? When we think about that strategic positioning, it requires you to shift your thinking a little bit. For some people, this is going to come more naturally than for others. So if you understand your personality type, you know whether or not you're going to gear more toward task-oriented or if you're going to be more strategic. It does not mean you cannot learn how to be strategic. It just means that you might have to put in a little bit more effort than somebody who is more naturally strategic. But what does this look like? It looks like identifying patterns. It looks like addressing the root cause of something. So often we put Band-Aids on corporate problems. We put Band-Aids on problems within the team instead of getting to the root of the issue. Now, getting to the root of an issue also requires psychological safety within your organization. So for some of you, there's going to be some barriers there where you don't feel safe calling people out. You don't feel safe calling a process out. So you have to make that determination for yourself. However, if you have an opportunity to be in the right room, to identify some of these problems, to talk about the root causes of things because you're seeing the connections because of the work that you do or the position that you have, say it. Raise your hand, say it. Even if you don't think that you're supposed to have a voice in that room, you're in that room for a reason. And so many people hold back what they want to say because they're afraid of how they're going to be perceived or they're afraid of how they're going to step on somebody's toes. But if you know that pointing something out is going to help that group have a better conversation, then do it. Because you don't know how somebody's going to perceive you in that room. Don't make that assumption for yourself. You need to say the hard thing and then help be a part of the solution. And that is how you create some of that leverage. All right. One of the things that I was really gifted in when I worked full time was being able to frame issues in meetings, especially in early meetings when we were talking about initiatives. I think being able to take the information that's being talked about in a meeting and explain it to people in a way that makes sense. And not only that, but help give the roadmap of here's where we're going to go and here's what it's going to look like. I think that's something that is really helpful. If you have somebody on your team that struggles with that and you see them struggling in a meeting, being able to explain themselves, if it's appropriate, being able to step in and say, hey, I have some different thoughts around how we can explain this. Do you mind if I take a stab at it? And then be that person that brings things together. Because again, we have to support each other, right? And sometimes it might look like, oh, they just stole your meeting. You're not stealing the meeting, okay? You're not stealing the meeting. But you're helping somebody who maybe is nervous or maybe doesn't have the same views or experiences you get into that information and go, hey, here's how I'm seeing it. Am I understanding this correctly? So there's a way to approach these things where you are exhibiting higher level problem thinking and you're able to connect the dots on things and you can articulate that in meetings in a way that makes other people go, oh, yeah, they got it. They're getting it. Oh, I really appreciate how you explained that. And then people can view you more positively. Can this backfire? Yes. Yes, it can absolutely backfire on you if you don't do it well or if you do it in the wrong room with the wrong person. So you do have to think about that. I can't answer that for you in this episode, but you do have to think about that. What I will say, though, is do not hold yourself back. If you see an opportunity and you can deliver something well and in a way that's going to work, then do it. I think that is something where I see a lot of professionals hold themselves back in their career too much, is they're not willing to say the thing that everybody wants to say because they're afraid of being perceived. And you really, in order to leverage in your career, you can't be afraid of perception. You really just have to push right through it. Okay. All right. A couple of other examples. I'm trying to give you some really clear examples of what this could look like. Because I think sometimes it gets a little squirrely of like, is this something that I can do? So hopefully some of what I've already talked about is helpful for you, but just in case, some of the examples that I did want to go through, instead of just meeting a deadline for a project, you might identify something that is unclear in a process and it's caused delays, and it's caused backups somewhere. And so maybe you propose a new system. So it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It doesn't have to be these big problems that you're solving. It's just you're noticing backups somewhere. And so you offer a solution to that backup. Something that I think is really common, and an example that I think a lot of people might resonate with is maybe you notice that there are certain complaints around something specific, and you realize that there's a gap in training. There's a gap in employee training that would solve this complaint and this issue. And so you bring that up to whoever needs to know about it, and something gets, put into the training to help with that. I know that's something that we did a lot as an organization when we did onboarding and realized, hey, this would have been really helpful to know. And we would share that with HR. And I know our HR really appreciated that. And they would make those adjustments because they wanted people to be successful and they wanted their onboarding to be about the right things. Okay. One thing to kind of wrap up this section, which I know is a little bit more ambiguous, but I think is very key to making that shift, right? The shift from execution to leverage really happens in how you look at problems and how you look at problem solving. But think of it this way. Your professional scope is going to evolve and can evolve when your thinking expands beyond your job description. And I think so many people get stuck in, that's not my job description, that's not my job description, that they limit what they're able to leverage within their career. And that is a choice. You make that choice in your career. Some of you do not want more. Some of you want to stay in the job description, do the work that you were hired to do, and that's it. That's totally fine. I'm not really talking to you. I am talking to the people who are like, I want more. I want to move up. I want to be known. I want to do the thing. then you have to look beyond the job description. You have to expand your thinking in your position and in your organization so that you can start getting in these rooms and having these conversations. Okay. The last one. The last leverage point within an organization that you can take advantage of is during transitions. We talked a little bit about this in the first section, but I want to really highlight some specific transitions where you can absolutely, quadruple your leverage, accelerate your leverage, because there is so much opportunity in transitions. So first is leadership change. I cannot express to you how much opportunity there is for you during a leadership change. However, leadership changes can be hard for a lot of people. And so what ends up happening is you're resentful, you're upset, you're frustrated. So you do not think about leverage. You do not think about how can I position myself well during this leadership change. You think about how angry you are. You think about how frustrated you are that this happened. Maybe the leadership change wasn't warranted and you didn't know about it and you liked the leader that was there, and now you have a new leader that maybe you don't care for. There are so many emotions wrapped up in leadership changes, and I get it. However, those of you that can take a step back and go, I don't love this, but I have to figure out how to work within it, you are going to have theoretically more opportunity than those that continuously push back. Now, most organizations are not good at change management, and they're not good at these leadership changes. So they don't provide opportunity to make it happen organically. So you have to be aware of the opportunity that you have. One of the things that I leveraged in a massive leadership change that I had in my career was I understood strategically what needed to be done, and I was able to articulate that, so much so that I was put into an interim leadership position. So that's what worked in my favor, was understanding what this new leader wanted. Did I like the new leader? No. Did I want to answer to this new leader? Absolutely not. But I understood that for the good of the department, we had to go this route and we had to work with this person. And so I did what needed to be done. Okay. Strategy shifts. This is where your team, your department, sometimes the whole organization makes a shift in strategy, or we have a big declaration of where the organization is headed. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but there's opportunity in that if you understand where you can fit in and where you can add value. If you have access to those people that are making those strategy shifts, make yourself known as best you can in order to make that change for yourself. And again, leverage your knowledge, and the strategy might be the best thing for you, right? It might work within your wheelhouse. And so you want to get in on those conversations. Market instability is another area where you can build leverage. Unfortunately, in some organizations, it means that your team or your sector might get eliminated. That can absolutely happen. But if you're a leader or you're somebody who sees opportunity, then you can also bring that up. I think sometimes some people who are a little bit more boots on the ground in terms of employees, so you're not really in the management space yet, but you're really into the work that you're doing. Sometimes you can see the market instability in a different way than the leadership does, because you're in it in a different way and you're having different conversations with colleagues in other areas. So use that to your advantage. Is there an opportunity? Are there ideas? And get that to the right people. And then something that everybody hates, but can again be a really amazing leverage point for some people, is mergers or restructures. We kind of talked about that in the beginning, but anytime that there are big structural changes within an organization or on a team, even if somebody on your team leaves, not gets fired, but leaves, there's an opportunity for you to go to your manager and say, hey, I know that so-and-so is leaving and they own this. I would love to fold that into what I'm doing. Or even better, can we talk about restructuring and retitling my role in light of this person leaving? So you are opening yourself up to opportunity and leverage by having these conversations proactively with your manager. But when there are mergers and restructures that are much bigger than you, sometimes you can't always have those conversations, but if you can, you need to try to have them. So sometimes there's opportunity, especially if you have a new manager that comes in over an area and they're trying to get the lay of the land. That's an opportunity for you to talk about where you want to go, the work that you've been doing, and where you can be helpful in this merger or restructuring. So again, a lot of these transitions bring about really big feelings for people. And I'm not minimizing those feelings at all, but you have to take a step back and think to yourself, in this scenario, is there a chance for me to leverage what is going on and have the right conversations and be in the right rooms so that I don't get left behind in this big transition? So that's something that you really need to think about. Transitions, they can move reputations forward so quickly. And honestly, it's hard to engineer sometimes. I think sometimes it's a lot of luck, but it's also being able to just quickly respond to things. And that's what you really have to think about, because people are going to see the way that you respond in uncertainty, and it is truly going to influence how much trust you're given past that. So if you are known as somebody that pushes back, they're not going to reach for you when promotions need to happen or decisions need to get made. You want to be the person that is working with them. Even if you're still frustrated, you can be frustrated and still help everything move forward well. And you can still choose to operate well within the transitions so that the trust is built. What I want you to take from this episode is simple. Leverage usually builds when the work is messy. It's when the priorities shift. It's when the roles are not fully defined. It's when something needs coordination and no one has claimed that coordination. These are the moments, these are the opportunities where people learn how you operate. We focus so much on titles and the specific responsibilities that come with those titles, but your leverage is going to happen in the inconvenience and the unclear parts of the work that often gets pushed to the side. As you move into this week, I want you to pay attention to where work is starting to feel undefined, where it feels messy, where some of your frustrations might lie, where decisions are being shaped. Where is clarity? Where do you need clarity on your team, in your position, in the organization? Those are going to be some of the moments that you have an opportunity to go in and influence and start to create that leverage for yourself. In the next episode, we're going to look more closely at skill leverage. We are breaking it down. And it's not going to be just talking about, oh, you need this credential and this, whatever, this education, but we're going to be talking more in terms of developing the right skills that are going to help with your trajectory, that are going to help with your influence. So it's going to be kind of everything, but really a focus on skills that push the leverage. If this episode helped you see your organization more clearly, please follow along so that you don't miss out on future episodes. And please share this episode with somebody that you think needs help understanding leverage within their organization. We're going to be including more resources and links to other podcast episodes in the show notes and the blog post for this episode. So check that out if you want to dig deeper. I'll see you next time. And remember, you control your career.